You don't remember when she first showed up. That's the unsettling part. Not her face. You remember that perfectly. Soft features, quiet eyes, the kind of smile that doesn't demand attention, but somehow keeps it. No, what bothers you is the gap. The missing moment where she entered your life without knocking. Because now she's just there. Right now, actually. You're sitting alone. Maybe on your bed. Maybe at your desk. The light in your room feels slightly dimmer than it should be. Not dark, just dulled, like something in the air is absorbing it. You shift a little, and for a brief second your skin tingles. Not pain, not cold, just the faint sensation of being watched. You ignore it. Of course you do, because your phone buzzes, and it's her. You don't hesitate. You never do. The moment her name appears, something in your chest tightens. Not fear, not quite. Anticipation, relief. Like the world finally snapped back into place after being slightly off. You open the message. Are you okay? Simple, harmless. But here's the thing. You hadn't told anyone you weren't. Your fingers hover over the screen. For a second your reflection stares back at you. Faint, distorted against the glass. And maybe it's just the lighting. But your face looks more tired than you remember. You shake it off. Type something casual, something safe. I'm fine. The reply comes instantly. I know you're not. Your throat tightens. And suddenly the room feels smaller. The air, heavier. You glance around, just to ground yourself. The familiar shapes are still there. Your door is closed. Your window reflects only darkness. Everything is exactly where it should be. Except, you swear you hear something. A faint creak. Not from the floor. From somewhere closer, like fabric shifting. You freeze. Listen. Nothing. Of course nothing. Because that would be ridiculous, right? You exhale, forcing a quiet laugh under your breath. Just your imagination. Too much stress. Too little sleep. That's all this is. Your phone buzzes again. Another message. Don't look behind you. That feeling returns. Stronger now. Not just a suggestion. A pressure. Like something standing just out of your sight line. Close enough that if you leaned back, you'd feel it. You shouldn't turn around. You know that. But your body doesn't listen. Slowly, against your better judgment, you begin to move. Your muscles tense. Your breath shallows. The silence stretches, thick and suffocating, wrapping around your ears until even your own heartbeat sounds distant. And as you turn, you catch it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. A shape. Right behind you. Too close. Too still. Too wrong. The face you saw on your phone, warm, gentle, familiar, is gone. In its place, something hollow, something stripped down to the truth beneath the illusion, a frame of bone, empty sockets where warmth should be, a jaw that doesn't quite align, yet somehow curves into the faintest suggestion of a smile, watching you, waiting, and the worst part? You don't feel the urge to run, you feel relief, because now you know, she was real. And that's exactly why you're already too late. You saw it, not clearly, not completely, but enough to trigger something ancient in your spine. That quiet, instinctive voice that whispers, this isn't right. And here's the part most people get wrong. That wasn't the moment you were in danger. That moment, that was just the confirmation. The real mistake happened much earlier, when you answered the first message. Because what you just encountered has a name. Hone-onna. A figure pulled straight from Japanese folklore, or more accurately, a pattern that refuses to stay buried in it. Translated loosely, it means bone woman, which, to be fair, is already a massive red flag. But let's be honest, if she had introduced herself like that from the start, you wouldn't have responded, would you? No. She showed up as something else, something softer, something easier to let in. And that's exactly how this works. Hone-onna doesn't break into your life. She blends into it. At first, she's just another presence. a coincidence. A person who appears at the right time, says the right things, and somehow understands parts of you that you haven't even said out loud yet. You tell yourself it's rare. You tell yourself it's special. You tell yourself you got lucky. Bold of you to assume that, because what you're experiencing isn't connection, it's calibration. Every word she says, every pause, every perfectly timed concern, it's not spontaneous. It's measured, adjusted, tuned to you. The more you open up, the more accurate she becomes. The more accurate she becomes, the harder it is to leave. And here's the kicker. By the time you realize something is off, you've already started depending on her, emotionally, mentally, maybe even physically. Because let's not pretend your body hasn't noticed the shift, the fatigue, the restless sleep, that low persistent tension sitting just under your skin, like your nerves are trying to warn you about something your brain keeps ignoring. You feel it. You just don't want to label it, because labeling it would mean losing her, and losing her would feel worse than whatever this is. That's the trap. Not fear, not violence, attachment. Hone-onna doesn't need to chase you. She waits, she listens, she adapts, and slowly, she replaces the parts of your reality that used to keep you grounded. Friends become distant, silence becomes comfortable, her voice becomes necessary, and somewhere along the line, without realizing it, you stop asking whether she's real. You start asking whether you're without her. That's when the structure collapses. That's when the illusion slips. And that's when you finally see what you saw a few seconds ago. Not a woman, not a lover, but a hollow framework held together by your need to believe in it. A skeleton wearing your expectations like skin. And here's the part that should concern you the most. Even after seeing that, even after watching her face peel away into something empty, something wrong, you didn't run. You froze. Because some part of you still wants her to turn back, still wants to believe the version you liked was real. That's not weakness. That's design. And now that you've seen both sides, the illusion and what's underneath it, you've officially crossed the line most people never notice. Which means from this point forward, you're no longer just interacting with Hone-onna. You're part of her cycle. And trust me, that's where things start getting complicated. You think you saw her true form, that skeleton, that hollow frame behind the illusion. You're wrong. What you saw wasn't her true form. It was just a crack, a brief glitch in something much more precise. Because Hone-onna doesn't have a fixed appearance. She builds one, specifically for you. And that's where things stop being folklore and start feeling uncomfortably personal. Think about it. Out of everyone she could have appeared as, why did she look like that? Why that face? Why that voice? Why that exact combination of softness, distance, attention and restraint? That wasn't random. That was assembled, piece by piece, from you. Every preference you ever had but never fully understood. Every memory of someone you almost loved. Every detail you once thought, if only they were just a little more like this. She takes all of it, refines it, and then wears it. Perfectly. That's why it works. That's why you didn't question it. Because you weren't falling for her. You were falling for a version of reality that finally matched your expectations. And let's be honest, that's addictive. The way she speaks, measured, calm, slightly delayed, like she's thinking just a bit longer than a normal person would. Not enough to feel wrong, just enough to feel intentional. The way she looks at you, not scanning, not judging, holding, like she's not just seeing you, she's staying with you. That's rare. That kind of presence, most people fake it for a few minutes. She sustains it indefinitely. And the more time you spend with her, the more something subtle begins to shift. You stop noticing what she is. You start noticing what she isn't. She doesn't argue. She doesn't contradict. She doesn't leave. At first, that feels like peace. Then it becomes silence. And silence has weight. You feel it in the room, in the pauses between conversations, in the moments where she should react but doesn't, because she's not responding. She's adjusting, always recalibrating to keep you engaged. And here's the part that usually slips past people. She doesn't just mirror your desires, she studies your absences. The people who left, the conversations that ended too soon, the affection that was never fully returned. She fills those gaps. Exactly. Which means every time you're with her, you're not just experiencing the present. You're reliving corrected versions of your past. That's why it feels deeper. That's why it feels meaningful. That's why it feels like something you shouldn't walk away from. Because walking away from her feels like losing closure you never had. And that's not an accident. That's architecture. A structure built entirely out of emotional loose ends. And you're the blueprint. Now here's the problem. Structures like this don't last. Not because they collapse, but because they consume. Maintaining perfection requires constant input, constant energy, constant attention. Yours. That fatigue you've been brushing off? That's not stress. That's the cost of keeping her intact. Every conversation, every moment of focus, every time you choose her over something real, you're reinforcing the illusion, feeding it, stabilizing it, and slowly transferring pieces of yourself into something that was never supposed to exist in the first place. Which brings us to the question you probably haven't asked yet. Not out loud anyway. If she's built from you, then what's left when she's done? Because the cracks you saw earlier, they weren't just in her. They were in the version of you that still thinks you're in control. And trust me, that illusion is a lot easier to break than hers. You think you were chosen. That's the comforting version of the story. Out of everyone she could have approached, she picked you. Not by accident, not randomly, but because there was something about you, something different, something worth staying for. That idea? It's the final layer of the illusion, because Hone-onna doesn't choose. She filters. You weren't selected, you qualified, and the criteria isn't what you'd expect. It's not strength. It's not intelligence. It's not even loneliness in the obvious sense. It's something much quieter, something harder to detect. Emotional availability, combined with unresolved gaps. People who can feel deeply, but haven't fully processed what they've lost. People who can connect, but carry fragments of conversations that never finished. People who move forward, but keep looking back just long enough to leave the door slightly open. That's the profile. That's the entry point. And once she finds it, she doesn't rush. She doesn't need to. Because the process isn't about capture. It's about alignment. At first, she stays just within your peripheral life. Not central, not dominant. Present enough to be noticed. Distant enough to feel safe. She lets you initiate. Lets you lean in. Lets you create the rhythm. Because the moment you believe you're in control, you stop guarding yourself. And that's when the real process begins. Not seduction, synchronization. Your habits start to shift. Your routines adjust. You check your phone more often. You wait for her responses. You reread conversations that shouldn't matter as much as they do. And slowly, without realizing it, your internal clock begins to orbit around her. That's phase 1. No pressure, no fear, just presence. Then comes phase 2, dependence. This is where most people still think they can leave. Technically, they can. Functionally, not anymore. Because by now she's not just part of your life, she's part of your regulation system. Your mood stabilizes when she's around. Your anxiety drops when she responds. Your thoughts quiet down when she's present. Take her away, and everything becomes louder, messier, incomplete. And humans don't like incomplete. So you go back, not because she calls you, but because your system demands resolution. That's the loop. And once you're in it, she tightens it, subtly. She starts to withdraw. Just enough. Replies get slower. Presence becomes inconsistent. Not absent, just unpredictable. And unpredictability. That's where attachment turns into obsession. You start chasing the version of her that was always available. You start trying to fix something that was never broken, just recalibrated. This is phase 3, consumption. By now, you're investing more than you're receiving. More time, more attention, more energy. And here's the part you won't like. She doesn't need all of it. She just needs enough. Enough to maintain form, enough to stay present, enough to keep you engaged. Everything beyond that, that's excess. That's what drains you. That's why you're tired. That's why your focus slips. That's why things that used to matter don't feel as sharp anymore. Because your bandwidth is being redirected continuously, quietly, efficiently, and the entire time you think you're building something, a connection, a relationship, a story. But from her perspective, it's a cycle. One she's run before, one she'll run again. With someone else, different face, same structure, same outcome. Which brings us back to you. You weren't chosen. You were compatible, at the right time, with the right cracks. And once those cracks are fully mapped, once every gap has been filled, mirrored, reinforced, your role starts to shift from participant to resource. And that's the point where most people finally ask the right question. Not does she love me, not is she real, but something much simpler, much more dangerous. How much of me is still mine? And if you have to ask that, you already know the answer isn't going to be comforting. So this is where you are now. Not at the beginning, not even in the middle. Somewhere near the point where things stop feeling like curiosity and start feeling like consequence. You've seen her, not the version you liked, not the one that made you feel understood, seen, almost chosen. You saw what's underneath. And yet, you're still here, still thinking about her, still replaying the way she spoke, the way she paused, the way she made silence feel safe. That's not coincidence. That's residue. Because Hone-onna doesn't just disappear when you recognize her. She lingers in your habits, in your thoughts, in the subtle ways your mind tries to reconstruct her. Even after the illusion breaks, you'll notice it soon. If you haven't already, you'll catch yourself checking your phone, expecting something. You'll reread old messages, searching for something you missed. You'll even start justifying it. It wasn't all fake. There was something real there. Maybe I misunderstood. That's the final stage. Not denial, reinterpretation. Your mind trying to soften the impact of something it can't fully accept. Because accepting it means admitting something far worse than being tricked. It means admitting you participated, you stayed, you adapted, you gave. Not because you were forced, but because it felt right at the time. And that realization, that's heavier than fear. Now here's the part you've been waiting for. The part where I'm supposed to give you a way out, a trick, a rule, a method, something clean, something reassuring. You already know I'm not going to do that, because with Hone-onna, there is no dramatic escape, no final confrontation, no moment where you win. There's only one thing that determines whether you make it out with anything left. Distance. Not emotional distance, not logical distance, physical, behavioral, complete. You stop responding, you stop engaging, you stop revisiting, you let the silence stay silent, and you endure what comes after, because there will be something, a gap, a discomfort, a kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels wrong, like something important is missing. That's not her. That's the space she was occupying. And if you're strong enough to leave that space empty, if you resist the urge to fill it with her again, then slowly, very slowly, you start to return. Your energy stabilizes, your thoughts clear, your sense of self reassembles. But it takes time, more than you'd like. And here's the part no one tells you. Even after all that, even after the silence settles, even after you convince yourself it's over, there will be moments, brief ones, quiet ones, where something feels familiar. A phrase, a tone, a presence just at the edge of your awareness. And for a second, you'll wonder if she's back. She isn't, probably. But the fact that you're still asking that question, that's her last imprint, and it doesn't fade easily. So here it is, the closest thing you're getting to a conclusion. If you've encountered Hone-onna, truly encountered her, then this was never about survival in the traditional sense. It was about retention, how much of yourself you manage to keep before the cycle completes. And based on everything we've seen, everything you felt, everything you haven't said out loud yet, your odds? Survival chance, 18%, not 0, but not comforting either. Because surviving doesn't mean escaping untouched. It means walking away with enough of yourself left to recognize who you used to be. And if that sounds difficult, that's because it is. So here's my final advice. Not as a warning, not as a threat, just a record. If something enters your life quietly, fits too perfectly, and asks for nothing except your time, start paying attention. Because the things that don't demand are usually the ones that take the most. And by the time you notice the cost, you've already paid it. Sweet dreams, if you can.